The arrow pierced clean through Ayana's shoulder, sending her tumbling from her painted mare into the thorny undergrowth. Blood seeped through her deerskin dress as she pressed her palm against the wound, her dark eyes scanning the ridge where her attackers had vanished like morning mist. The rival tribe's war party had ambushed her at dawn, stealing her winter provisions and leaving her for the wolves. "Cursed," she whispered, her grandmother's prophecy echoing in her fevered mind. "The spirits have marked you, child. Love will be your destruction, and destruction your salvation." 3 days she had wandered the Colorado Territory wilderness, her strength ebbing with each labored step. The October wind bit through her torn clothing, and frost painted the golden aspen silver. Her people believed she carried a curse, that any man who loved her would meet a violent end. 2 suitors had already proven the prophecy true, their bodies claimed by stampeding buffalo and mountain lion attacks shortly after declaring their intentions. Now, as darkness crept across the valley, Ayana collapsed beside a frozen creek. Her lips moved in a death song, her voice barely audible above the wind. The curse would die with her, and perhaps that was mercy enough. The sound of spurs jangling against stone made her lift her head. A figure emerged from the twilight, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered Stetson and leather chaps stained with trail dust. His horse snorted steam in the cold air as he dismounted, his boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. "Well, I'll be damned," the stranger muttered, kneeling beside her. His face was weathered like old leather, with kind blue eyes that reminded her of summer sky. A thick mustache framed his mouth and silver streaked his auburn hair. "Miss, you're hurt bad." Ayana tried to crawl away, but her body betrayed her. "Stay back," she gasped. "I am Ayana of the Ute people. I carry death to those who would help me." The cowboy removed his gloves, revealing calloused hands that spoke of hard work and honest living. "Name's Jeremiah Hawthorne," he said, tearing strips from his shirt. "And I reckon death's been chasing me long enough that we're old acquaintances." He pressed the makeshift bandage against her wound, his touch surprisingly gentle for such large hands. "This'll hurt some, but it'll stop the bleeding." "You don't understand," Ayana whispered, her vision blurring. "The curse hell," Jeremiah interrupted, lifting her carefully. "Only curse I see is a young woman bleeding to death in the wilderness. Now you can fight me or let me help, but either way, you're not dying on my watch." As he carried her toward his horse, Ayana felt something she hadn't experienced in years' hope. Perhaps the prophecy was wrong. Perhaps this weathered cowboy with gentle hands could break the chains of fate that bound her. The stars emerged overhead, cold and distant as diamonds, as Jeremiah secured her to his saddle and mounted behind her. His warmth seeped through her chilled body, and for the first time in days, death seemed a little further away. Jeremiah's cabin sat in a protected valley, smoke curling from its stone chimney like a prayer ascending to heaven. He carried Ayana inside, where firelight danced across rough-hewn walls adorned with simple furniture and the tools of a working man. A pot of venison stew bubbled over the flames, filling the air with rich, savory scents. "This'll do," he murmured, settling her on his narrow bed. "Got some whiskey for the pain and clean cloth for proper bandaging." Ayana watched him move with quiet efficiency, heating water in a battered kettle and gathering supplies. Despite her protests about the curse, he showed no fear, only a determined kindness that confused her. Most white men either desired her or despised her. This one simply helped. "Why?" she asked when he returned with steaming water and torn sheets. "Your people and mine have spilled much blood. Why risk yourself for a stranger?" Jeremiah paused in his work, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Lost my wife and boy to cholera 3 winters back," he said quietly. "Sometimes a man needs to save something, just to remember he's still alive himself." He cleaned her wound with gentle precision, his weathered hands steady despite their size. The whiskey burned, but Ayanna bit back her cries. She had endured worse pain. The curse had taught her that suffering was her constant companion. "There's talk in town," Jeremiah continued, rapping her shoulder, "about a Ute woman who brings misfortune. They say she's beautiful as a sunset and twice as dangerous." He met her startled gaze. "Reckon that'd be you?" Fear flickered in Ayanna's chest. "Then you know I speak truth about the curse. You should take me back to the wilderness and let nature claim what it will. Maybe." Jeremiah tucked the blankets around her. "Or maybe it's just coincidence dressed up as superstition. Either way, you're hurt and need healing. The rest will sort when you're stronger." He ladled stew into a wooden bowl, the meat tender and seasoned with wild herbs. Ayanna ate slowly, her body desperate for nourishment. The warmth of food and fire began to thaw the ice that had settled in her bones. "My grandmother saw my future in dream visions," she said between spoonfuls. "She said love would be my curse and my salvation. I've seen only the curse part." Jeremiah settled into a chair beside the bed, his own bowl steaming in his lap. "Grandmothers are wise, but they don't always see the whole picture. Maybe your salvation just ain't arrived yet." Outside, wind howled through the valley, rattling the cabins. Shutters, but inside, warmth and safety cocooned them both. For the first time in years, Ayanna allowed herself to imagine a life without constant fear, though she dared not hope too deeply died as exhaustion claimed her. She felt Jeremiah's presence like a shield against the darkness. Perhaps this kind cowboy could indeed break her curse. Or perhaps she would destroy him as she had the others. Only time would tell which prophecy would prove stronger. Fear or hope. Dawn broke gray and cold over the valley, but inside the cabin, warmth lingered. Ayanna woke to find Jeremiah already dressed, coffee brewing on the stove and bacon sizzling in an iron skillet. Her shoulder ached but felt stronger. The bleeding finally stopped. "Morning," he said without turning. "Figured you could use some proper food to build your strength back." She struggled to sit up, accepting the plate he offered. The bacon was crispy, the eggs fresh from his small flock of hens. Simple fare, but it tasted better than any feast she'd known. "I should leave," Ayanna said, though her voice lacked conviction. "The longer I stay, the greater danger for you." Jeremiah poured coffee into 2 tin cups, the liquid black as midnight. "Where would you go?" "Your shoulder needs another week to heal proper, and winter's coming hard this year. I can smell it in the wind." Through the window, she could see frost coating the meadow grass. Her people would be preparing for the cold months, but she was no longer welcome among them. The curse made her an outcast, feared and shunned by her own blood. "Tell me about this curse," Jeremiah said, settling beside her. "What exactly happened to make your people believe such a thing?" Ayanna stared into her coffee, memories rising like ghosts. "When I was 16, Standing Bear courted me with gifts of horses and beadwork. He was brave, handsome, everything a maiden could want. The night he asked my father for my hand, a grizzly attacked him on his way home. They found pieces." Jeremiah nodded grimly. "And the second?" "2 summers later, Swift Arrow began visiting our lodge. He wrote songs about my beauty, carved me trinkets from river stone. A week after he declared his love publicly, lightning struck him during a clear sky storm." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The medicine man said the spirits marked me as cursed. That love would bring death to any man who claimed my heart." "Might be coincidence," Jeremiah said. "This country's hard on men. Bears and lightning kill plenty of folks who ain't cursed." 3 separate incidents, Ayanna continued. "Young Hawk died in a flash flood after gifting me a wedding dress. The pattern became clear. My people cast me out to protect their sons and fathers." Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Finally, he stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I don't put much stock in curses," he said eventually, "but I believe in patterns. Thing is, patterns can be broken if a man's willing to try. You would risk your life on such foolish hope?" He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, not fear or pity, but determination mixed with the loneliness that matched her own. "Miss Ayanna, I've been half dead since my family passed. If helping you costs me my life, at least I'll have lived some before dying. That's more than I can say for the past 3 years." Outside, a hawk circled overhead, its cry piercing the morning silence. Ayanna watched its graceful flight and wondered if this moment marked the beginning of her salvation or the prelude to another man's doom. A week passed in careful routine. Jeremiah tended his livestock while Ayanna recovered, her strength returning, like spring water filling a dried well. They spoke little during daylight hours, but evenings brought conversation over shared meals and the companionable silence of two souls who understood solitude. "You lost more than wife and child," Ayanna observed one night, watching him carve arrows for her depleted quiver. His hands moved with practiced skill, but sadness lingered in the set of his shoulders. "Ranch burned down same month they died," Jeremiah admitted. "Drought made the grass tinder dry, and one lightning strike took everything I'd built. Sometimes I think God's got a particular fondness for testing what a man can endure. Yet you built again." She gestured at the snug cabin, the small but well-tended homestead. "Habit, I reckon. Work keeps a man from thinking too much." He tested the arrow's point against his thumb. "What about you? You ever want more than just surviving?" The question caught her off guard. For so long, mere survival had consumed all. Her energy staying one step ahead of death, the curse, the loneliness that gnawed at her soul. "I used to dream of children," she said softly. "A lodge filled with laughter, a husband who would grow old beside me. But dreams are dangerous things for cursed women, maybe." Jeremiah set down his carving knife. "Or maybe the right dream just takes longer to come true." That night, a blizzard struck without warning. Wind shrieked around the cabin like tortured. Spirits and snow fell so thick it erased the world beyond the windows. They huddled near the fire, sharing blankets and stories from their past lives. "I was a teacher once," Jeremiah revealed, surprising her. "Back in Missouri, before I came west. Had a little schoolhouse with 12 students and dreams of civilizing the frontier through education. What changed? Reality." His laugh held no humor. "Learned that some places don't want civilizing, and some folks prefer their ignorance. After Margaret and little Tom died, teaching seemed pointless. How do you prepare children for a future when you can't protect the ones you love?" Ayanna understood that particular pain. "The curse taught me similar lessons. Sometimes caring brings only heartbreak." "Yet here we sit," Jeremiah said, his eyes reflecting firelight. "Two broken people sharing warmth against the storm. Maybe that's all healing ever is, finding someone willing to weather the cold beside you." The storm raged for 3 days, trapping them in an intimate cocoon of shared space and quiet companionship. They played cards with a worn deck, told stories of their childhoods, and slowly began to know each other beyond the circumstances that brought them together. On the third night, as wind finally began to subside, Ayanna found herself watching Jeremiah's face in the flickering light. Somewhere during their forced proximity, something had shifted. The careful distance she maintained around all men had eroded, replaced by a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the fire, the storms. "Breaking," she whispered. "Yes," he said, but his eyes never left her face. "Some storms do." Outside, snow continued to fall, but gentler now, not the fierce assault of the past days, but the quiet blessing of winter settling over the land. Inside, two hearts beat in rhythm, wondering if fate might finally offer mercy instead of punishment. Spring arrived early that year, painting the valley in shades of green Ayana had forgotten existed. Her shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a thin scar as a reminder of that October night when death had nearly claimed her. She could have left weeks ago, but something kept her anchored to this small homestead and the quiet man who had saved her life. "Cattle need to be moved to higher pasture," Jeremiah said one morning, saddling his horse. "There's good grass up in the mountain meadows, and the snow's melted enough to make the trail passable." Ayana swung onto her own mount, a gentle mare Jeremiah had bought from a traveling trader. "I'll ride with you. These mountains hold no secrets from me." They worked together through the warming days, driving his small herd to summer grazing grounds. Ayana's knowledge of the land proved invaluable, guiding them around washouts and dangerous passes. At night, they camped under stars that seemed close enough to pluck from the sky. "You ever think about what comes next?" Jeremiah asked one evening, feeding their campfire with dry pine branches. The question she'd been dreading had finally arrived. Ayana stirred their pot of beans, avoiding his gaze. "I should return to my people. Perhaps enough time has passed that they'll accept me again." "That what you want?" She considered lying, offering the safe answer that would preserve the careful distance between them. But months of shared life had worn away her defenses, revealing truths she'd tried to bury. "No," she admitted. "I want to stay here, in this valley, with you. But wanting and having are different things for women like me." Jeremiah was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a man who'd wrestled with his own demons. "I been thinking about that curse of yours," he said, "about patterns and coincidence and the difference between them. And all those men who died, they were young, full of passion and fire. They loved you the way young men love, with grand gestures and public declarations." He met her eyes across the dancing flames. "Maybe that's what called death to them." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe the spirits don't object to love itself, but to the kind of love that burns hot and fast. The kind that threatens to consume everything in its path." Ayana felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Are you saying I'm saying I love you, Ayana? Not with the fierce passion of youth, but with the steady warmth of a man who knows what loss means. I love you quiet and deep, like embers that burn all night instead of flames that flicker and die." The words hung between them, dangerous as lightning before a storm. Ayana waited for the curse to strike, for some cosmic punishment to claim. This good man who dared speak of love to the woman marked by death. But the night remained peaceful, filled only with cricket songs and the distant call of a nighthawk. No bears emerged from the darkness, no lightning split the clear sky. "You're not afraid?" she whispered. Jeremiah reached across the fire and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I've been half dead for 3 years, Ayana. If loving you kills me, at least I'll die fully alive. And if it doesn't, well, maybe we'll prove that some curses ain't stronger than the right kind of love." The town of Cedar Falls buzzed with whispers when Jeremiah rode in with Ayana beside him. She felt the weight of hostile stares, heard the muttered conversations about the cursed Indian woman who'd bewitched another fool white man. The general store fell silent when they entered, women gathering their children closer as if curse might be contagious. "We need supplies," Jeremiah said calmly to the shopkeeper, Horace Whitman, whose face had gone pale at Ayana's presence. "Coffee, flour, salt, and ammunition." "Now see here, Jeremiah," Whitman stammered, his eyes darting nervously. "I got no quarrel with you, but bringing her into town. Folks are saying she's dangerous, that she brings death to any man who folks say lots of things," Jeremiah interrupted, his voice carrying a steel edge Ayana had never heard before. "Most of it's ignorant nonsense. Now, you selling supplies or not? Dr. Elias Thornton pushed through the gathering crowd, his medical bag in hand and concern etched on his weathered features. He delivered half the babies in Cedar Falls and set more bones than he could count, earning him respect that transcended gossip. Jeremiah, might I have a word? The doctor's tone was urgent but not unkind. They stepped outside, leaving Ayanna to endure the suspicious stares alone. She held her head high, remembering her grandmother's teachings about dignity in the face of fear. Through the window, she could see the two men in heated conversation, Thornton gesturing emphatically while Jeremiah's jaw grew tighter. Not superstition, but fact, she heard the doctor saying as they returned. 3 men dead in circumstances that defy natural explanation. Whatever she is, she's dangerous. She's a woman who's been hurt and needs healing, Jeremiah replied firmly. Same as any patient you've tended, Doc. Thornton's gaze softened as he looked at Ayanna, professional compassion warring with small-town prejudice. Miss, I mean no offense, but the pattern is coincidence dressed up as destiny. Jeremiah finished. We'll take our chances. They completed their shopping in tense silence, the other customers maintaining careful distance. As they loaded supplies into their wagon, Sheriff Clayton Murphy approached, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Jeremiah, I got to ask you to reconsider bringing her around town, Murphy said, not unkindly. Folks are spooked, and spooked people do stupid things. For everyone's safety, she's done nothing wrong, Clay. Being the victim of coincidence ain't a crime. Maybe not, but if something happens to you, then it happens. But it won't be because of her. That night, camped halfway home, Ayanna watched Jeremiah tend their fire with the same careful attention he gave everything. His defense of her in town had moved her deeply, but also filled her with dread. You shouldn't have done that, she said quietly. Done what? Stood up for me. Made yourself a target for their fear and suspicion. Jeremiah looked up from the flames, his blue eyes serious. Ayanna, if a man won't stand up for what he believes in, what good is he? I believe in you, in us. Sometimes belief requires taking a stand, even if it costs you everything. Everything I had worth keeping, I already lost 3 years ago. Everything worth having now sits right here beside this fire. He reached for her hand. I won't apologize for choosing life over fear. In the distance, a wolf howled lonely, wild, free. Ayanna squeezed Jeremiah's fingers and wondered if love might indeed prove stronger than the curse that had shaped her life. The town's hostility was a problem they'd face again, but tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, she allowed herself to hope summer brought unexpected visitors to their valley. Ayanna was tending her herb garden when she spotted the riders, a dozen Ute warriors led by her uncle, Chief Running Wolf. Her heart clenched with old pain and newer fear as they approached the cabin where Jeremiah was repairing a corral fence. Ayanna, Running Wolf called, his weathered face grave as he dismounted. We have come to speak with you. Jeremiah set down his hammer and walked toward them, his movements careful but unafraid. Ayanna stepped between them, old customs warring with new loyalties. Uncle, she said in her native tongue, why have you come? I was cast out from the people. To bring warning, Running Wolf replied, switching to English out of respect for Jeremiah's presence, and perhaps to offer redemption if the spirits allow. He gestured to the youngest warrior in his band, barely more than a boy. This is White Eagle, son of my sister. The night you disappeared, he volunteered to track you to ensure you did not die alone in the wilderness. White Eagle stepped forward, his young face earnest. I followed your trail for 7 days. I saw the white man find you, tend your wounds, carry you to safety. I watched his cabin through the winter. You've been watching us? Jeremiah's voice held a note of alarm. From a distance, to see if the curse would claim another life. Running Volf explained, but no death came. No bears, no lightning, no accidents. White Eagle reported that you lived in harmony, like two parts of a whole. Ayana felt dizzy with the implications. The curse may be broken, her uncle continued, but there are other dangers now. Word has reached us that miners have found gold in the sacred mountains. Soldiers will come soon, and with them, war. Your people will need to choose between fighting and fleeing to the reservation. That has nothing to do with us, Jeremiah said. Though his knuckles were white where he gripped the fence rail, Running Wolf's eyes were sad but resolute. Everything to do with you, white man. The miners know of this valley, know it sits between their claims and the main trail. They will come here, and they will not be as honorable as you. We'll face that when it happens, Jeremiah replied. It happens now, White Eagle interjected, pointing toward the southern pass. 20 armed men. 2 days behind us. They seek to claim this land for their leader, a man called Silas Brennan. Ayana knew that name of brutal mining, boss who'd driven 3 tribes from their ancestral lands through violence and intimidation. If Brennan wanted their valley, he would take it and kill anyone who stood in his way. You must come with us. Running Wolf urged, both of you. The curse may be broken, but that does not make you safe from bullets. Jeremiah looked at Ayana, and she saw the choice reflected in his eyes. Safety with her people meant abandoning everything he'd built. Staying meant facing almost certain death against overwhelming odds. This is our home, she said quietly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. We will not run. Then we will stand with you, Running Wolf declared. The spirits have shown us that your curse is lifted. Perhaps they mean us to help you defend what love has built. As if summoned by his words, dust appeared on the southern horizon riders approaching fast. Brennan's men arriving ahead of schedule. Ayana felt Jeremiah's hand find hers, steady and warm. Together? He asked. Together, she confirmed, and for the first time in her life, the future held more promise than fear. The attack came at dawn, just as Running Wolf had predicted. Silas Brennan led 20 armed men into the valley, their horses thundering across the meadow like an avalanche of violence. Ayana crouched behind the cabin's stone foundation, rifle steady in her hands, while Jeremiah and the Ute warriors took positions around the homestead. Hawthorne. Brennan's voice boomed across the distance. You got something that belongs to me. This valley sits right in the path of my mining operation. Nothing here belongs to you, Brennan, Jeremiah called. Back, his Winchester aimed at the mining boss's chest. Turn around and ride out while you still can. Afraid that ain't possible. See, I got investors expecting returns, and your little patch of paradise is blocking progress. But Brennan spat tobacco juice and grinned, revealing gold teeth. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give you 10 minutes to clear out before we burn you out. And I'll give you 10 seconds to reconsider before my friends here fill you full of holes. Jeremiah replied. For the first time, Brennan seemed to notice the Ute warriors positioned strategically around the property. Running Wolf stepped into view, his war paint gleaming in the morning sun, an arrow knocked to his bowstring. Well, well, Brennan mused. The Indian lover's got himself some savage friends. No matter, we got enough firepower to handle a few redskins. The first shot came from one of Brennan's men, a wild shot that splintered wood above Ayana's head. Then the valley erupted in gunfire and war cries, smoke and chaos filling the air like a hellish fog. Ayana moved with deadly precision, each shot carefully aimed. Her father had taught her to shoot, but it was her time in the wilderness that had honed her into a true marksman. She watched Brennan's men fall one by one, their greed meeting justice delivered from smoking rifle barrels. Jeremiah fought like a man possessed, protecting not just his home but his future. Every shot he fired was for the life he'd built with. Ayana, for the love that had pulled him back from the brink of despair. When his rifle clicked empty, he drew his revolver and kept fighting. The battle seemed to rage for hours, though the sun barely moved across the sky. Running Wolf's warriors fought with the ancient fury of their people, defending not just their niece but the principle that some things were worth dying for. When the smoke finally cleared, Silas Brennan lay dead in the meadow grass, his dreams of empire ended by a Ute arrow through his heart. Of his 20 men, only 3 survived, wounded and thoroughly defeated. They limped away on foot, their horses claimed as spoils of war. "It's over," Jeremiah said, pulling Ayana into his arms. She was unhurt but shaking from adrenaline and the magnitude of what they'd survived. "The curse truly is broken, Running," Wolf observed, cleaning his knife on the grass. "Death came to this valley today, but it claimed your enemies, not your love." White Eagle whooped with joy, dancing around the scattered bodies of their attackers. The other warriors began gathering. Weapons and horses, practical prizes for their victory. "What now?" Ayana asked, looking around at the valley that had seen so much violence. "Will there be others like Brennan?" "Maybe," Jeremiah admitted. "But if there are, we'll face them the same way together, with friends beside us." Running. Wolf approached, his stern face softened by something that might have been pride. "My niece, you have found a man worthy of the love that once brought only death. The spirits smile on this union. You'll return to the tribe?" Ayana asked. "For now. But when the soldiers come, and they will come, you will always have a place among your people." He mounted his horse, gesturing for his warriors to follow. "Live well, Ayana, love well. The curse that shaped your life is ended." As the Ute warriors rode away, Ayana and Jeremiah stood amid the aftermath of battle, their arms around each other, watching the sun climb higher over their valley. Death had indeed come calling, but for once, it had taken the right victims. 1 year later, Ayana stood in the cabin doorway, watching Jeremiah play with their infant son in the meadow where Brennan had fallen. Little Thomas named for Jeremiah's. Lost Boy gurgled with delight as his father lifted him toward the autumn sky, his chubby hands reaching for golden leaves that danced on the wind. The curse was truly broken. Not only had love failed to bring death, it had brought new life into the world. Thomas had been born healthy and strong, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, a perfect blend of 2 worlds learning to exist in harmony. "Children from town come to learn," Dr. Thornton had told them last week. "Their parents trust you now, Ayana. They see that love can bloom where fear once grew." It was true. What had begun as simple medical visits, Ayana's knowledge of healing herbs had proven invaluable to the settlement, had evolved into something more. Children arrived at their doors seeking stories and learning, their parents no longer whispering about curses and death. Jeremiah had resumed teaching, setting up a small schoolhouse in what used to be their barn. 3 days a week, he taught reading and arithmetic to the valley's children, while Ayana shared her knowledge of plants, tracking, and the ways of the natural world. "Mama," little Mary Whitman had asked just yesterday, "is it true that Miss Ayana used to be cursed?" "Hush, child," her mother had replied, but gently. "There's no such thing as curses. Only misunderstandings that need time to heal." The sound of approaching horses drew Ayana from her memories. Running Wolf and White Eagle rode into the yard, their faces bearing good news for a change. The threat of war had passed, a peace treaty signed, a reservation established that would allow the Ute people to remain in their ancestral lands. "Uncle," Ayana called, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been making bread, something she'd never imagined doing in the old life. "Welcome." "My nephew grows strong," Running Wolf observed, watching Thomas attempt to crawl after a butterfly. The spirits have blessed this union beyond measure. More than we deserve, Jeremiah said, joining them with his son in his arms. Deserve has nothing to do with it, White Eagle laughed. The spirits give what they choose to give. Your task is simply to receive their gifts with grateful hearts. That evening, after her uncle and cousin had departed, Ayanna sat with Jeremiah. On the porch they'd built the previous spring. Thomas slept peacefully in his cradle, one tiny fist curled against his cheek. "Do you ever miss it?" Jeremiah asked. "The life you had before?" Ayanna considered the question, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I miss the certainty of it sometimes," she admitted. Terrible as the curse was, it made choices simple. Now I have so many possibilities that sometimes I don't know which path to take. "That's not a curse," Jeremiah said, taking her hand. "That's life. Real life with all its beautiful complexity." A year ago, she had been dying in the wilderness, convinced that love was her enemy. Now she sat beside a man who had proven that love, the right kind of love, patient and steady and true, could indeed be salvation. "You are my only warmth," Jeremiah whispered, the words he'd spoken that first night in the cabin. "And you are?" "My freedom from fear," Ayanna replied, leaning into his embrace. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to a love that had conquered death itself. In the distance, a nighthawk called, not lonely now, but joyful, celebrating the miracle of two hearts that had found their perfect match in a world too often ruled by hatred and fear. The curse was broken. The love remained. And in their valley, where tragedy had once threatened to take root, hope bloomed eternal under the vast, forgiving sky.